My name is Michael Vance. At 62, I had cultivated an existence as meticulously arranged as the rare orchid collection that graced my sunroom. For 4 decades, I'd navigated the treacherous currents of Wall Street, first as a junior analyst, then as a formidable portfolio manager, and finally as a discreet, highly sought-after private equity consultant. My reputation preceded me, unshakable, incisive, and with an uncanny ability to sniff out hidden vulnerabilities, whether in a balance sheet or a human psyche. This discerning nature, this quiet vigilance, had been both my shield and my sword in a world brimming with hidden agendas. I prided myself on my appearance, too. My silver hair, a carefully coiffed cascade of elegant waves, was as much a part of my professional armor as my sharp suits and even sharper wit. It was a visual testament to years of careful maintenance, a crown of earned wisdom. The dawn of the 14th of July, a day marked on every calendar in our family for over a year, was supposed to be perfect. My only son, David, a man in his late 30s who had inherited his father's gentle demeanor but sadly, none of his resilience, was finally marrying Victoria Sterling. Victoria, the name itself felt like polished ice on my tongue. She was a vision of modern ambition, a rising star in real estate, with an undeniable charm that, to my trained eye, felt precisely 1 layer too thick. I had tried, subtly at first, to voice my reservations to David, to point out the subtle inconsistencies in her narrative, the fleeting calculations in her eyes. But he was utterly, hopelessly captivated, blinded by her vivacious energy and what he perceived as her unwavering devotion to him. "Mom, you're just being overprotective," he'd always say, dismissing my intuition with a wave of his hand. "Victoria loves me. She's exactly what I need." Today was the day he would commit his life to her. The ceremony was set for early afternoon at the Sterling estate, Victoria's mother's sprawling property in Greenwich, Connecticut. A place of manicured lawns, towering elms, and enough inherited wealth to make even a former Wall Street veteran raise an eyebrow. I was to sit in the front row, resplendent in a sapphire blue silk gown, my silver hair gleaming under the Connecticut summer sun, the proud mother of the groom. The thought of it, of the photos that would be taken, had filled me with a quiet anticipation. I had spent weeks at the most exclusive salon in Manhattan, undergoing specialized highlight treatments and precise styling, preparing for this moment. I wanted to look my best, not just for David, but for myself. After years of tending to others' needs, I deserved this quiet triumph, this moment of unadulterated beauty. But then, I woke up. The first sensation was not the familiar weight of my silver waves on the pillow, but an unsettling lightness, a peculiar coolness brushed against my scalp, a sensation utterly alien. My eyes snapped open, fighting the dim pre-dawn light that filtered through the heavy silk drapes of my master bedroom. My hand, instinctively, shot to my head, expecting to feel the meticulously styled hair I had so carefully maintained for decades. Instead, my palm met bare scalp, rough with stubble, a horrifying, sandpaper-like texture that sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. A nightmare. It had to be a nightmare. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I scrambled out of bed, tripping over the plush rug, my bare feet hitting the cool marble floor with a thud. I stumbled into the adjoining bathroom, my breath catching in my throat. The vanity mirror, usually a source of calm reflection, now became a horrifying portal to my worst fear. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed and utterly unrecognizable. Patches of hair, haphazardly sheared, clung desperately to my scalp, as if someone had taken dull scissors, or worse, a blunt razor, and systematically, maliciously, butchered my hair while I slept. My once elegant silver mane, my symbol of grace and composure, was gone, replaced by a mottled, uneven landscape of raw scalp and jagged stubble. 62 years of life, and I had never looked more vulnerable, more exposed. "Victoria!" I whispered, the name a venomous hiss on my lips. My voice cracked, raw with a mix of disbelief and an emerging, chilling certainty. She had done this. My daughter-in-law, Victoria, had crept into my room sometime during the night, and mutilated my hair. The realization hit me like a physical blow, doubling me over the bathroom sink, my stomach churning with bile. The meticulous preparation, the anticipation of finally feeling beautiful again after years of letting myself fade into the background, prioritizing my work and David's happiness, all of it destroyed in one malicious act. My hands, usually so steady, shook uncontrollably as I reached for my phone. My fingers fumbled with the cold metal, eventually finding David's contact. I pressed the call button, my thumbs slick with sweat. The phone rang once, twice, an eternity in the suffocating silence of my room. "Mom, it's 6 in the morning." David's voice, thick with sleep and annoyance, grumbled through the receiver. "The wedding isn't until noon. Is everything okay?" "Your wife." She cut my hair off. The words came out broken, barely audible. A fractured confession of horror. Silence. A long, agonizing stretch of it, stretching between us like a chasm. When he finally spoke, his voice carried that familiar edge of irritation, the weary, condescending tone he'd developed over the past 3 years, ever since Victoria had wrapped her perfectly manicured claws around him. "Mom, that sounds... Are you sure you didn't have some kind of episode? Maybe you should just... lie down." "I am not having an episode." The words exploded from me, desperate and raw, echoing off the pristine bathroom tiles. "Your wife attacked me in my sleep, David. She came into my room last night. She cut off all my hair. I'm bald." Another pause. Deeper this time. More ominous. "Mom, this is crazy. Victoria was with me all night. We stayed at the hotel, remember? For the rehearsal dinner. She wouldn't have left. She could have come here after you fell asleep, David." I practically screamed, my voice rising to a frantic pitch. "Why would she do something like that?" His response was chillingly calm, laced with the patronizing disdain that had become Victoria's signature, now effortlessly adopted by my own son. "Mom, you're being paranoid. And frankly, this is ridiculous. It's our wedding day. You're going to ruin everything." He hung up. Just like that. The dial tone buzzed. A final, definitive cut. My own son, dismissing my horror, my pain, my clear accusation, for the sake of his bride, for the sake of his perfect wedding day. An hour later, David arrived, and Victoria, of course, was with him. She walked into my home with the casual confidence of someone who owned the place, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning sunlight streaming through my kitchen window. It gleamed, a stark, painful contrast to my own ravaged scalp. "Oh my goodness, Michael," she said, her voice a practiced gasp, her hand covering her mouth in mock horror. Her eyes, however, sparkled with a triumphant, malicious glee. "What happened to your hair?" The performance was flawless. The wide, innocent eyes, the trembling hand, the feigned concern. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed her. But I knew. I always knew. My years in finance had honed my ability to read people, to detect the slightest tremor of deceit beneath a polished facade. Victoria was a master manipulator, but I was a grandmaster. "You know exactly what happened, Victoria," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, though a tremor of pure, unadulterated rage vibrated beneath my words. Victoria's eyes widened with theatrical innocence, her lower lip trembling. "I have no idea what you mean, David. Your mother is accusing me of something truly terrible." My son looked between us, his face a mask of frustration, annoyance, and a baffling, almost willful ignorance. At 35, David had inherited his father's gentle features and my stubborn streak, but none of the backbone needed to stand up to the woman he'd married. He simply wanted peace, an easy life, and Victoria was adept at offering it, at least on the surface. "Mom, this is crazy," he pleaded, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. "Victoria was with me all night. We stayed at the hotel. We were together for the rehearsal dinner. She wouldn't have come here after I fell asleep." "She could have," I insisted, my voice gaining strength. "And she did. Because your mother, Clarice, didn't want me looking better than her today." Victoria gasped again, a dramatic, breathless sound, pressing her hand to her chest as if she had been physically struck. "Michael, how could you say such a horrible thing? I would never..." Oh, wouldn't you? I shot back, my eyes boring into hers, searching for any crack in her composure. You told me last week that Clarice was nervous about the photos, that she was worried about looking old next to the groom's family. You said she was especially concerned about my striking silver mane drawing too much attention. Victoria's voice rose to the perfect pitch of wounded innocence, a practiced crescendo of indignation. I was just making conversation, Michael. I can't believe you'd twist my words like this. You are being paranoid, and frankly, you are ruining David's wedding day with these outlandish accusations. David stepped closer to his wife, his arm sliding protectively around her waist. The gesture, so familiar, so intimate, sent a cold knife through my chest. He was choosing her, over me, over the truth. Mom, you need to apologize right now, he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Apologize? The word came out as a strangled whisper, a gasp of pure disbelief. David, look at me. Really look at me. He glanced at my bare, mutilated scalp, then quickly, dismissively, away, his gaze flitting to the floor. Maybe you should see a doctor, Mom. Hair loss can be a sign of stress. Or an episode. It didn't fall out, David. It was cut. By your wife. He shook his head, his face contorted in a grimace of exasperation. You're being absurd. Victoria is not capable of such a thing. You're upset, and I understand that. But you're imagining things. Now, are you going to get ready for the wedding, or are you going to continue with this tantrum? Tantrum. The word hung in the air, mocking me. My own son, calling my very real, very visceral pain a tantrum. I looked from David, who now stared at me with an expression of thinly veiled disgust, to Victoria, whose lips curled into a triumphant, almost imperceptible smirk. In that moment, something shifted within me. The rage, the disbelief, the hurt it coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea I was hiding a $20 million fortune, meticulously built, carefully shielded, entirely for my own protection. And they certainly had no idea what a woman like me, a former Wall Street titan with decades of experience dismantling corporate facades and exposing hidden fraud, was truly capable of when pushed to her absolute limit. They wanted to erase me from David's life? To dismiss me as an unstable old woman? Fine, let them. But they would soon learn that a woman who had navigated the shark-infested waters of high finance, a woman who had always seen the hidden ledgers and the concealed agendas, was not easily dismissed. My silver hair might be gone, but my steel was only just beginning to show. And this wedding, this meticulously planned charade, was about to become the most expensive mistake of their lives. My mind, accustomed to crisis, immediately shifted into strategic mode. The initial shock and fury began to recede, replaced by a cold, methodical clarity. I had to think. What was my immediate goal? To expose Victoria, yes, but more importantly, to protect myself, to ensure that David's complete subservience to her wouldn't somehow endanger my own carefully constructed autonomy, and, perhaps, to remind them both exactly who they were dealing with. First, the hair. I couldn't attend the wedding looking like this. It would be a surrender, a visible sign of their victory. I walked back to my bathroom, my movements deliberate. My custom wig, a perfect match for my natural silver, sat on a mannequin head on my dresser. I had bought it years ago, a precautionary measure after a minor surgical procedure, but I had never needed it, until now. I clipped it on, adjusting it meticulously, securing it firmly. The transformation was startling. In the mirror, my elegant, composed self stared back. The visible damage was concealed. The invisible wound, however, festered, fueling my resolve. Next, the dress. The sapphire silk gown, a symbol of pride, now felt like a shroud. I wouldn't wear it. I pulled out a simple, impeccably tailored black pantsuit, a power statement from my consulting days. It was understated, elegant, and projected an air of quiet authority. No flash, just substance. This wasn't about looking prettier. It was about looking formidable. As I dressed, my mind raced through the past 3 years. Victoria's subtle, insidious infiltration into David's life. She had begun by isolating him from his friends, then from me, subtly undermining my influence. My financial background meant I managed all our family assets, a role Robert, David's late father, had explicitly entrusted to me. After Robert's passing 5 years ago, David had naturally looked to me for guidance, especially regarding the substantial trust Robert had left him. But Victoria, with her background in high-end real estate and her relentless pursuit of opportunities, had slowly, expertly, convinced David that she should manage his portfolio, that she had the modern vision he needed. I had watched, powerless, as David slowly pulled away, turning over more and more control to her. I had tried to warn him. David, I'd said months ago during a rare, quiet dinner, Victoria has a particular way of seeing the world. Her focus is purely transactional. Be careful what you entrust to her. He had just laughed. Mom, you're stuck in the past. Victoria knows how to make money. We're going to be set for life. It was then, sitting in that quiet dining room, watching my son's naive optimism, that I had decided to fully activate my personal contingency plan. The $20 million, it wasn't an inheritance from Robert. It was my money, meticulously accumulated over 40 years in finance, kept entirely separate, entirely private, in a series of offshore accounts and discreet trusts that even the most aggressive divorce lawyer would struggle to unearth. I had built it, not out of greed, but out of a deep-seated need for independence, a safeguard against any unforeseen future. My professional life had taught me that wealth was power, and independence was the ultimate luxury. I had seen countless women, intelligent and capable, rendered vulnerable by their reliance on others. I would not be one of them. Now, as I adjusted the lapels of my black suit, a grim determination settled over me. This wasn't just about my hair. This was about power, about control, and about exposing a predator who threatened to devour my son's future, and implicitly, my own peace of mind. I decided not to go directly to the wedding. First, I needed to gather more intel. My phone, a secure, untraceable device I kept for sensitive consultations, was my first weapon. I called Eleanor Vance, a retired cybersecurity expert who had once worked with me on a complex fraud investigation involving encrypted communications. She was sharp, discreet, and owed me a favor. Eleanor, it's Michael. I need a deep dive. Victoria Sterling. Everything. Financials, past associations, any litigation, any anomalies. And I need it by noon. Priority 1. Eleanor's voice, a gravelly whisper, held no surprise. You got it, Michael. The usual? Or are we digging for bones? Bones, Eleanor. I suspect a full skeleton. Next, I called Detective Harding, a seasoned, no-nonsense police officer I'd worked with on a previous pro bono case involving financial fraud and elder abuse. He was retired now, but his network was still formidable. Detective, I need to file a police report, assault, and a request for an immediate forensic sweep of my bedroom. I believe my daughter-in-law entered my home last night and caused significant damage to my person. No rush on the arrest, but I need the official documentation, and I need it handled with utmost discretion. He grunted. You're not usually one for significant damage complaints, Michael. What's going on? Let's just say a cherished personal asset was aggressively liquidated, I said, a wry, bitter humor entering my voice. And I have reason to believe it's part of a larger, more predatory pattern. Just get the ball rolling. I'll provide details later. My third call was to Mr. Albright, a formidable forensic accountant I had personally trained years ago. He was a master of unearthing hidden assets, of following digital breadcrumbs. Albright, I need you to quietly audit Victoria Sterling's recent real estate transactions, specifically anything related to shell corporations, offshore transfers, or unusually rapid asset liquidation. Pay particular attention to anything involving Clarice Sterling's portfolio as well. I'm looking for a pattern, a motive that extends beyond mere greed. Albright's response was crisp. Consider it done, Miss Vance. Your priorities are my priorities. By 11:30 a.m., dressed in my formidable black suit, wig perfectly in place, I was reviewing the preliminary reports. Eleanor's initial findings were chilling. Victoria Sterling had a history, not a criminal record, but a pattern of short, intensely lucrative marriages to older, affluent men, all of whom had suffered significant financial losses shortly after the relationships ended. No direct evidence of fraud, but a string of conveniently timed bankruptcies, unusual stock liquidations, and highly unfavorable prenuptial agreements that always seemed to leave the men financially vulnerable while Victoria emerged unscathed, often with a newly acquired untraceable asset. Clarice, her mother, was often a beneficiary of these unlucky investments. This wasn't just about David. This was a well-honed modus operandi. They were a team. Albright's report, delivered to my secure server, confirmed my suspicions. Victoria had recently initiated several complex real estate transactions involving a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands, liquidating significant assets from David's portfolio, assets he had recently transferred to her management, and routing them through a labyrinthine network of accounts. The funds weren't going into new investments for David. They were being siphoned off, slowly, steadily, towards untraceable destinations. And a substantial sum had just been transferred to a private account under Clarice Sterling's maiden name, an account I hadn't been able to trace before. This was not about looking prettier than Clarice. This was about systematically stripping David of his inheritance, using the wedding as the ultimate cover. The hair incident? A grotesque, petty act of control, a visible marker of her dominion, designed to make me feel helpless and unstable. The police report, filed electronically by Detective Harding, detailed the alleged assault, the forced entry, which I knew was a lie, but it served its purpose, and the request for forensic analysis. It was a formal record, a legal foundation for what was to come. I took a deep breath, the scent of expensive coffee filling my office. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't personal. It was business. And in business, I had always won. I arrived at the Sterling estate precisely 5 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The valet, a young man with a pristine uniform, bowed slightly as I handed him the keys to my classic Mercedes. My black suit was a quiet rebellion amidst the pastel frocks and designer fascinators of the other guests. My wig felt secure, a subtle shield. I walked with a deliberate, unhurried pace, my gaze sweeping over the opulent grounds, noting the security details, the discreet cameras, the layout of the sprawling estate. Years of assessing risk had made me acutely aware of my surroundings. Inside the grand ballroom, transformed into a breathtaking floral wonderland for the ceremony, guests were already seated, murmuring excitedly. David stood at the altar, looking nervous yet beaming, adjusting his tie. Victoria, poised at the back of the aisle, radiated an ethereal beauty in her impossibly expensive lace gown. Clarice, draped in shimmering gold, preened in the front row, casting imperious glances around the room. Her smile, I noticed, was a shade too wide, her eyes darting nervously. She knew something was amiss. I spotted an empty seat, precisely in the third row, on the aisle. It was closer than I usually sat, but today, proximity was crucial. I settled in, my expression calm, almost serene. No one seemed to notice my meticulously styled wig, a small, silent victory. The organ music swelled, signaling Victoria's procession. As she began her majestic walk down the aisle, her train sweeping behind her like a frothy cloud, I pulled out my phone. Not to take a picture, but to quietly, discreetly, send a series of texts. The first was to David. A single, innocuous link to a secure web page. Dearest David, the accompanying message read, "Before you make a vow you cannot undo, please take a moment to review this. It is a gift, from me to you, of clarity." The second was to Mr. Albright, the forensic accountant. "Proceed as planned. Initiate the asset freeze. Now." The third was to Detective Harding. "Ready for Phase 2. The evidence is about to unfold." The fourth, and perhaps most deliciously, was to a prominent society journalist I had known for years, a woman who thrived on scandal and high-profile exposés. "Darling," I typed, a sly smile touching my lips. "You might want to send a reporter to the Sterling wedding. It promises to be quite the show." As Victoria glided past me, her smile fixed, her eyes avoiding mine, I met Clarice's gaze. Her eyes, narrowed in suspicion, suddenly widened. Her perfect smile faltered. She had just received a text, too, I realized, her phone buzzing almost imperceptibly in her perfectly manicured hand. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Albright had moved. The asset freeze, she knew. The ceremony proceeded. The minister began his solemn words, his voice echoing through the ornate hall. David, looking genuinely moved, recited his vows, his eyes fixed on Victoria, utterly oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Victoria, her voice a little too saccharine, repeated her own, a practiced performance of devotion. Then, as the minister reached the pivotal moment, "If anyone here present knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence in the room became absolute, thick with anticipation. My phone buzzed. A text from David. "Mom, what is this? What did you send me?" His voice was an agitated whisper, cutting through the hushed reverence of the ceremony. He was staring at his phone, his face pale, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Before the minister could continue, before anyone else could react, a subtle ripple went through the crowd. First, a few confused whispers, then a collective gasp. On the two large screens flanking the altar, screens meant to display charming childhood photos of David and Victoria, the images abruptly changed. Instead, a series of documents flashed across the screens, clear and legible for all to see. The first image was a screenshot of Victoria Sterling's recent transaction history, transfers to offshore accounts, shell corporations, and finally, a substantial sum routed directly to Clarice Sterling's discreet, untraceable bank account. Next, a damning email chain between Victoria and Clarice, discussing the mark, David, and strategies for asset consolidation after the wedding. Then, a summary of Eleanor's findings, the pattern of suspicious marriages, the conveniently timed financial collapses of Victoria's former partners, all meticulously documented, and finally, a scanned copy of the police report I had filed just hours ago, detailing the alleged assault, the significant damage to my person, and a blurred but identifiable image of my head with the mutilated hair. A collective gasp swept through the room. Murmurs erupted, rising to a cacophony of shocked whispers. Clarice, her face ashen, stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting frantically from the screens to me. Victoria, who had been about to place the ring on David's finger, froze, her smile dissolving into a mask of pure terror. She spun around, her eyes blazing, searching for me in the crowd, her gaze eventually locking onto mine. "Michael!" she shrieked, her voice stripped of its polished veneer, raw with fury and panic. "What have you done?" David, finally tearing his gaze from the screens, stared at Victoria, his face a canvas of utter devastation. "Victoria, is this true? What is this? What have you done to my mother?" His voice cracked, a desperate plea for denial. Victoria, seeing her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, lunged towards me, her wedding gown suddenly a symbol of her desperate rage. But before she could reach me, two stern-faced men in dark suits, who had been discreetly blending into the crowd, stepped forward, blocking her path. Detective Harding and his partner, Victoria Sterling. Detective Harding's voice cut through the chaos, calm and authoritative. "You are under arrest for assault, attempted fraud, and financial malfeasance. You have the right to remain silent." The entire ballroom erupted. Guests stood, some pointing, some gasping, others pulling out their phones to record the unfolding drama. Clarice, whimpering, tried to make a break for the side exit, but was quickly intercepted by another of Harding's discreetly placed officers. The society journalist I'd tipped off was already there, snapping photos, her eyes alight with the thrill of the scoop. Victoria screamed, a raw, guttural sound, as the detective secured her wrists with zip ties. "No, this is a lie, Michael, you old witch, you set me up!" I simply watched, my expression serene, a quiet triumph in my eyes. The performance was over. The truth, meticulously uncovered, had laid bare their deceit. David, utterly shattered, stood alone at the altar, the wedding band still clutched in his trembling hand. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, confused, as if seeing me for the first time. "Mum?" I didn't say a word. I simply stood, a quiet, formidable figure in my black suit, my unblemished wig, a testament to my resilience. The minister, utterly bewildered, had retreated into the background. The wedding was definitively, spectacularly, over. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Victoria and Clarice were taken into custody. The extensive documentation I had provided, combined with Albright's immediate asset freeze and Eleanor's comprehensive digital forensic report, proved to be an ironclad case. The media frenzy was unprecedented. The Sterling wedding, once anticipated as the social event of the season, became a national scandal. Headlines screamed, "Millionaire bride arrested at altar for alleged fraud and assault. Groom's mother unmasks daughter. In Law's Web of Deceit, Wall Street veteran exposes elaborate wedding scam." My carefully cultivated private life was suddenly thrust into the spotlight. But this time, I was the hero, the shrewd, unshakable matriarch who had saved her son from financial ruin. David was, understandably, devastated. He didn't understand how he could have been so blind, so easily manipulated. The initial days were a blur of shock, anger, and profound self-pity. He refused to speak to me, initially, caught between his shattered illusions and the overwhelming evidence of Victoria's treachery. But as the legal process unfolded, as more of Victoria's past machinations came to light, including a string of hidden debts and a previously undisclosed felony conviction for petty theft in her youth, cleverly expunged but unearthed by Eleanor, David slowly, painfully began to see the truth. His financial portfolio, which Victoria had been systematically draining, was mostly recovered thanks to Albright's swift action. The $20 million I had secretly held remained untouched, a testament to my foresight. It became my ultimate safety net, my true freedom. The divorce proceedings were mercifully swift, given the overwhelming evidence against Victoria. She was denied any claim to David's assets, and Clarice, too, faced legal repercussions for her complicity in the fraudulent schemes. Their carefully constructed world of inherited wealth and social pretense crumbled, leaving them with little but shattered reputations and mounting legal bills. I never gloated. I felt no savage triumph, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. My aim had never been revenge, but protection. For David, yes, but more importantly, for myself, for the peace and autonomy I had meticulously built over a lifetime. David eventually came to me, weeks later, his face haggard, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate apology. "Mom," he began, his voice choked with emotion. I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I was so blind. How could I have been so stupid?" I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, now a man broken by his own naivety. "Love, David, especially a desperate kind of love, can be a powerful, blinding agent," I said gently, my voice soft but firm. "Victoria was very good at what she did, and you wanted to believe in her. But sometimes, wishing for something doesn't make it true." We didn't fully reconcile immediately. Trust, once fractured, takes time to rebuild. But we started. I set clear boundaries. I would always be his mother, but I would no longer be his financial crutch or his emotional punching bag. He began therapy, a necessary step for him to understand his own patterns and vulnerabilities. He returned to managing his own affairs, albeit with the help of a new, highly reputable and transparent financial advisor I recommended. He slowly began to rebuild his life, piece by painful piece. My own life blossomed with a newfound freedom. The $20 million, my carefully guarded secret, became the foundation for a new chapter. I retired fully from all consulting work. I bought a sprawling, private estate in the rolling hills of Vermont, far from the frenetic energy of New York and the judgmental whispers of Connecticut society. It was a place of quiet beauty, of sweeping vistas and untouched wilderness, a stark contrast to the manicured perfection of the Sterling estate. Here, I built a state-of-the-art equestrian facility, indulging in my lifelong passion for riding, a hobby I had neglected for decades. The powerful, intelligent horses became my companions, their honest gaze a balm to my soul. I established the Michael Vance Foundation for Financial Literacy and Women's Empowerment, dedicating a substantial portion of my fortune to educating young women from disadvantaged backgrounds about financial independence, entrepreneurship, and self-protection. We funded scholarships, provided mentorship programs, and created resources to equip them with the knowledge and resilience to navigate a world that could be both exhilarating and predatory. I saw myself in these young women, ambitious, eager, but often unaware of the hidden dangers. I wanted to arm them with the tools I wished I had possessed in my younger, more naive days. My days were filled with purpose. I rode my horses through winding forest trails, the crisp Vermont air, a constant invigoration. I read voraciously, devouring books on history, philosophy, and art, expanding my intellectual horizons beyond the confines of finance. I hosted small, intimate gatherings at my estate, inviting a select circle of trusted friends, former colleagues, and the brilliant young women from my foundation. We would discuss finance, yes, but also art, politics, literature, and the complex tapestry of human experience. These were connections based on mutual respect and genuine intellectual curiosity, a far cry from the superficiality of my previous social circles. Victoria and Clarice. Their names occasionally surfaced in the tabloids, usually in footnotes to other, larger scandals. Victoria, stripped of her assets and her reputation, was last seen struggling to make ends meet as a low-level real estate agent in a far-flung, undesirable corner of Florida, her once sparkling charm now tarnished by desperation. Clarice, her once grand estate now mortgaged to the hilt to cover legal fees and mounting debts, had descended into a life of bitter obscurity. Their world, built on deceit and avarice, had indeed crumbled to ashes. I felt no satisfaction, no vengeance, only a quiet understanding of consequence. They were irrelevant to my new life, to my hard-won peace. My true legacy was not the humiliation of my adversaries, but the empowerment of future generations, the quiet rebuilding of trust, and the fierce reclamation of my own narrative. Sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, as the Vermont sunset painted the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender, I would run my hand over the smooth, bare skin of my scalp. My silver hair had slowly begun to grow back, a soft, downy stubble, a tangible reminder of the day I woke up bald. It was a scar, yes, but also a symbol of resilience. The very act of cutting my hair, meant to break me, had instead been the catalyst for my ultimate liberation. This is my story, a testament to the unyielding power of foresight and the unwavering courage to protect your own truth. Have you ever been dismissed? Belittled? Have you ever had your very essence attacked? Your vulnerabilities exposed by those you thought you could trust? Remember this. Appearances can be deceiving, and the most dangerous threats often wear the most charming smiles. But beneath the surface, under the veneer of beauty and apparent normalcy, lies a deeper truth, waiting to be unearthed. The world is not always kind. It is often a complex game of strategy and hidden agendas, but you are stronger than you know. You possess an inner resilience, an intuitive wisdom that can guide you through the darkest betrayals. Trust your instincts. Cultivate your own resources, not just financial, but intellectual and emotional. Build your own safety net, your own personal fortress, so that when the storm inevitably comes, you are not swept away, but stand firm, unyielding, and ultimately free. For sometimes the most profound acts of self-preservation are born from the deepest wounds. And sometimes, the very people who try to cut you down, to strip you bare, inadvertently reveal the incredible strength, the true beauty, the unbreakable spirit that lies within. They may think they have left you with nothing, but in reality, they have cleared the path for you to build something far greater, far more authentic, and infinitely more powerful than they could ever comprehend. My bald head was not a mark of shame. It was a crown of quiet triumph, a symbol of a life reclaimed, redefined, and ultimately, gloriously mine.